This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
An OPEC Plus panel is unlikely to alter existing plans to raise oil output when it meets on Monday, 4 OPEC Plus delegates said, noting the producer group is keen to recover market share while summer demand is helping to absorb the extra barrels. The meeting of the Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee, JMMC, which includes top ministers from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Allies led by Russia, is scheduled for 1200 GMT on Monday. 4 OPEC Plus sources told Reuters the meeting is unlikely to alter the group's existing policy, which calls for 8 members to raise output by 548,000 barrels per day in August. Another source said it was too early to say.
US President Donald Trump is unlikely to follow through on his threat to place 100% tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil because it would worsen politically damaging inflation pressures, and his similar threat against buyers of Venezuelan oil has had limited success, especially in China. Trump said this month he would put 100% secondary tariffs on countries that buy Russian exports unless Moscow agrees to a major peace deal with Ukraine in 50 days, a deadline that would expire in early September. The threat mirrored an announcement in March that the US would slap tariffs on buyers of sanctioned Venezuelan oil. No such tariffs have been imposed since, even though Venezuela's exports of oil have jumped.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Russia's daily oil exports from its western ports are set to be around 1.77 million barrels per day, BPD, in August, down from 1.93 million barrels of oil per day in July's plan, amid the expected rise in refinery runs, Reuters calculations based on data from 2 sources show. On a daily basis, oil loadings from Russia's Primorsk, Novorossiysk and Ust-Luga, including Urals, Kazakh KEBCO and Siberian light oil grades, will decline some 8% in August from the current month. Russia's offline primary oil refining capacity is set to drop in August from July to some 3.74 million metric tons, some 27.4 million barrels, from some 4 million tons this month, according to Reuters calculations based on data from industry sources. The data is provisional and will be updated after the end of the month.
Chemical products companies in Brazil, which exported $2.4 billion to the U.S. last year, face a slew of contract cancellations as President Donald Trump has threatened a new 50% tariff on the South American nation's exports from August 1. Since Trump's announcement, export orders have been canceled for certain resins and compounds used to make fertilizers, which Brazil supplies to the U.S. agriculture sector, André Cordeiro, head of Brazilian chemical lobby Abaquim, said on Friday. Fundamentally, these decisions are being made because the bet is that he will actually apply the tariff, Cordeiro said. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Iron ore futures locked in a 5th consecutive weekly gain, overcoming an early decline on Friday even as rising port inventories and weaker global steel production weighed on prices. The most traded September iron ore contract on China's Dalian Commodity Exchange ended daytime trade 1.11% lower at 802 yuan and 50 fen, $112.01, a metric ton. The contract rose nearly 1% this week. The benchmark August iron ore on the Singapore Exchange was 2% lower at $102.95 a ton, as of 0717 GMT, but gained 2.16% overall this week.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will meet US President Donald Trump on Sunday in Scotland after EU officials and diplomats said they expected to reach a framework trade deal this weekend. The deal would likely include a 15% baseline tariff on all EU goods entering the United States and probably a 50% tariff on European steel and aluminium, the officials and diplomats said. Following a good call with at POTUS, we have agreed to meet in Scotland on Sunday to discuss transatlantic trade relations and how we can keep them strong, von der Leyen said in a post on X.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Russia, one of the world's top producers and exporters of sunflower oil, on Friday suspended floating duty rates on sunflower oil and sunflower meal until August 31 to boost exports and help local producers. Separately, the world's largest exporter of barley effectively cut export duty for barley and corn by adjusting the calculation mechanism in order to boost exports. The moves follow a government meeting on measures to boost agricultural exports held earlier this week. President Vladimir Putin set out a goal of increasing agriculture exports by 50% by 2030.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.